Hi Year 12. Viva Voces can be a little bit scary, so here is an example. You can do your Viva Voce in any way you want. You might find a much more creative way than mine, but here is an example because a lot of people are nervous about it. But if you think about a Viva Voce, it's a speaking task, and that's what it should be. It shouldn't be you reading. You can take notes. I have notes for my pretend Viva Voce today, but you shouldn't be just reading off the notes. You should be having a conversation with the marker, and you should be reflecting on what you've done. So I'm going to do an example Viva Voce. First of all, let's have a look at the assessment task. The assessment task, the mandatory components, means that you need to have a graphic essay, which means an essay, and images to go with it. You've all seen mine from the previous video, so here it is. You also need, for advanced only, a 500-word imaginative task that we've worked on with a professional writer. You need to answer the 3 questions, which I will do so in my Viva Voce. Here they are. And 5 minutes talking. So try and look at your marker as often as possible and have a conversation, okay? We're only going to ask you questions if you might have missed something and if we think you can add to your presentation and to your marks by answering that question. But we're not going to trick you up. We're not going to ask you any questions that are going to stress you out. We're just going to ask you to think and reflect, because that's part of the new HSC, is reflecting upon your work. So let's start. I'm going to start my timer. I'll have my phone on the desk, and I'm sure Miss Bunce will have hers as well. But it's a good idea for you to know the time as well. And so I'm going to put my stopwatch on. I actually haven't rehearsed this before. I wrote it, and so we're just going to see how long it goes for. I don't recommend you do that. I recommend you go through it and see how long it takes. But I reckon I've done this enough that I reckon I've got to 5 minutes. So let's see. So I'm going to start. So you might come in and just say hello to your teacher. So, hi Miss Bunce, because it would be weird if I said hello to myself. So this is my graphic essay. And throughout this Viva Voce, I'm probably going to pick it up and point to particular areas. I'm going to talk a lot about the questions and the text, but sometimes I might pick it up and refer to little bits and pieces. And that's what you should probably do too, because you got to think about it as a whole presentation. So my core text is the documentary Wasteland, directed by Lucy Walker. It's about an artist using people working in a recycling facility to become part of the artwork. So they collect the recyclable materials, and then they help make it, and they end up being gigantic portraits of themselves. The main concept in the film is what makes art, the hidden poverty in Brazil, and limiting human experiences for those living in poverty, and the ethical decision making of those who have more power. Now, ethical decisions is the advanced question. For standard, I believe your question is something different. So whenever I say ethical decisions, you'll need to talk about your question specific to standard. The picture book Zenobia by Danish author Morten Dewar is my related material, and it focuses on a young Syrian refugee fleeing her war-torn home. The ideas of human experience in this book is one of powerlessness and empathy, and of course the ethical decisions made by governments and those opposing these ideologies, as well as the public rhetoric of refugees, which is often quite negative. So the first question is how texts represent individual and collective human experiences and emotions associated with or arising from these experiences. I've also got a little bit of a paradox in this answer as well, which is okay, as long as you're answering the questions throughout your presentation. It doesn't have to be 1, 2, and 3. I just thought this fit with the first question as well. So the first paradox that I think we need to consider is, can there be individual experiences within humanity, or do they all become collective, particularly when you're talking about literature? Because we have the creator and we have the responder, which is us, as well as the characters and the people in the film or the book. In my picture book, the characters are fiction, but they are representations of real experiences in the world. Of course, with a documentary, the people's experience in there are real to some extent. I mean, we must remember it's storytelling as well. However, literature automatically becomes a collective experience because we are all involved in the responding to it. So I think that's an interesting paradox. The way I've linked the text, however, is through the ethical decisions made by those in power. And those, more often than not, can be unethical decisions that impact the people who are powerless negatively. As I've mentioned before, don't forget to answer your standard question if you're a standard or English studies student. The advanced question is about ethical decision making, and so that's what I'm talking about for this particular Viva Voce, so just switch it over for your question. I've also linked the text through human experience through empathy. The texts are a call to action. What can we do to beat poverty? How can we be more empathetic? Really important questions. And how can we be better people? What happens if we make a concerted effort to have more empathy? This is why literature, I believe, is so important, because it has the power to change not only perspectives and the way we think and provide us with more knowledge and experience of others that we may not experience, but in that small way, it can then have the power to change the world. The emotions that arise within these texts are that of sorrow, hope, self-loathing, acceptance, fear, and hope. But at the core of each text, every character or individual wants to feel safe, protected, and appreciated. These are common and collective experiences and needs that we want. We want to feel pride in what we do and who we are, not shame. And that's what some of these protagonists are made to feel within these texts. Hopefully these emotions also flow out to the responders, and we too can better understand their plights, and we can see from our safe homes and schools, we can experience some of what these individuals live through every single day. Question 2 is a bit tricky and probably needs some thinking about. How your core text and related text provides insights into anomalies, paradoxes, and inconsistencies in human behaviour and motivations. They're difficult and tricky words, but because they're in the rubric, I really think that they are going to be asked in the HSC, or at least you will need to touch on them at some point. So let's talk about anomalies, paradoxes, and inconsistencies. In Wasteland particularly, we see anomalies and inconsistencies within each human experience. Some feel more pride in their work, others feel a sense of shame, some are forced into the position because their other choices are less than ideal. So it's interesting in that way. Now, if the definition of an anomaly is something that deviates from the norm or expected, the entire documentary, I think, is an anomaly or paradox, which is different in that a paradox is seemingly observed but may prove to be true. Thus, the idea that waste can even be art at all and sold for so much money, and that these people can become part of an artwork, is in itself an anomaly or a paradox, because it is something that deviates from the norm. Because when we think of art, we don't usually think about rubbish. We also don't think about the people who collect the rubbish being a part of that art and becoming part of that. Something I found personally disconcerting is the fact that these people live in poverty, and yet at the same time, some of these artworks sold for £28,000. That's $50,000 Australian. And thus there is a significant gap in the social and socio-economic status between these people and those who purchase the art. Muniz, our artist, appears inconsistent at first, as he states that to help these people would be arrogant of him, because who is he to say that they need help? Personally, I felt that was a bit of a cop-out, because we witness how deeply discontent and how full of shame some of these people are and how difficult their lives are, while we see Muniz in his gigantic library with his artworks and his very middle-class life. And then we begin to judge his ethics. Eventually, however, at the end of the documentary, he does use the proceeds to help the people in a long-term way by building them a learning centre. So I was very happy about that, but there were some ethical decisions that he had to make within his and throughout his journey. The inconsistency of human behaviour in Zenobia comes from humanity itself. It's widely believed that we protect our children, and yet this young child in Zenobia lives in fear and isolation after her parents are killed in warfare and is forced to join a boat to escape her war-torn country. The media's response to refugees is also an anomaly, and most mainstream media is unempathetic to the plight of refugees, and this often influences others in a negative way. It is human to have empathy for others, and thus to deny someone's safety is a great human inconsistency. The third question is a reflection on the process of creation, including explanation of your visual component and writing. So overall, I'm really happy with my graphic essay. If you watch the first video I created, it took a few prototypes And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with even starting what I thought was going to be my finished piece and then seeing the end result, because sometimes you just need to get your ideas out of your head and onto the paper to figure out what's going to work and what wasn't. And after I looked at a couple on the website, on some, you know, online, and Googled some, and after some students in my advanced class came to me with these amazing ideas saying, can I do this, which I can't wait to see, they're going to be incredible, I thought, I really need to lift my game. And that's okay, it takes time, but all good things do. The two questions that I answered previously, they made me think more deeply. And this is evident in my essay and my thesis statement regarding the importance of ethical decision making and how literature has the power to transform not only ourselves but the world. So if I just do a whiz around here, I think my graphic essay really captures what I've been trying to say about ethical decision making and how a man without ethics is a wild beast loosed upon the world. So I think being human means that we think that ethics is really important. And as I explained in my other video, I wanted to have the two sides of the text, the core text and the related material, but I wanted to join them somehow. So I joined them through this rubbish, which then turns into water, and obviously the refugee trying to escape on the boats. And I've got this media rhetoric here of go home, because we do hear that a lot. And then the bloodshed is kind of a metaphorical bloodshed, because it is, you know, the sacrifice of these people who collect the waste of the middle class people. And of course I've sort of made creative ways to put my, because it is a graphic essay, you don't want writing, you know, to overpower it and be dominant. And so I've thought of creative ways of rolling up my thesis statement, of having concept 2 in an envelope, or concept 1, and then concept 2 would be packed in here as well. And of course my imaginative writing. If you can't read any of this, obviously, you know, we want to read your work. Like for this example, I mean, it looks great, but I don't know if I could actually read that imaginative writing. Just hand in a separate document with the essays that we can read. That's fine. I just kind of like the way that this has been put together, because you do have to be a little bit creative. For further analysis on this, please see video 1. I hope this has helped you with your Viva Voce.